Welcome everybody in. It is your favorite show of the week, The Great Debate. This week we're going to be talking about the greatest action star, and we're talking Bruce Willis, The Rock, Van Damme, Statham, Schwarzenegger, and Stallone. And no, this is not a teaser for The Expendables 3.
Although it would probably be a pretty good teaser, but yeah, those are the guys we're going to debate. It'd be myself against Mike the Greek, who's on the line. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Oh, thank you for having me, as always.
No problem. So, J-Rock, why don't you break down how this is going to work since we got 6 guys? It's kind of similar to our Battle of the Bonds, but give everybody kind of a breakdown of how this is going to work.
Absolutely. So we're going to have a total of 3 rounds, and we'll, of course, start off with our esteemed guest, Mike the Greek, also the host of Joystick Judgment Day, which you can always catch on Mondays. It is our Wired In Network's video podcast, so make sure you check that out.
Video podcast.
Absolutely. iTunes, Stitcher, check it out. Plenty of great stuff. So Mike the Greek will start us off. He will have a chance to talk about the particular action star he has picked for that round. And then Rob will get to talk about his action star. And then we'll do point, counterpoint, and move on until I will make the ultimate judgment call as to who is the greatest action star of them all.
Yeah. So it'll be Willis versus The Rock in round 1, Van Damme versus Statham in 2, Schwarzenegger versus Stallone in 3, and then you will pick the one guy out of all 6.
Yes, I will.
Who is the best. Now, I got something else to kind of ask you about. How come Mike got a nice intro with him being the host of Joystick Judgment Day, but I got nothing?
Because you interrupted me.
No, screw you. That's one demerit for you, sir. That's one demerit.
But Rob, you already came in with like 20 demerit points just before the discussion started.
You were born a demerit. You are a demerit.
Damn it.
Gentlemen, all right, start your engines.
My mom
I still get no intro? God damn it. I get no love.
You'll get nothing and like it.
Wow.
Maybe you'll get an
That's
intro.
What she said.
You're just going to have to sit and find out. So be a good boy.
All right.
Quietly.
Round 1, Mike, you got Bruce Willis, right? And I've got The Rock?
Uh-huh.
All right.
All right, so here we go. Of course, our esteemed guest, Mike the Greek, gets to take the first crack at round 1. Round 1, ready, and bing!
I don't think anyone could deny that Bruce Willis is the man, okay? Yippee-ki-yay motherfucker. I mean, who else out of most of the people we're going to talk about can say that they've put a line into one of the greatest lines of pop culture? So much range to Bruce Willis. He obviously has done a lot of action films, but he's also done sci-fi. He's done drama. He's done comedy. The guy he's all over the map, and the guy doesn't age. I mean, he still looks pretty much the same as John McClane, maybe a little less hair, but he could still go possibly another 20 years and still be a convincing action hero. He's just all over the map. It's awesome.
All right, ready? Now we're going to toss it over to the co-host of Thursday's show, The Show, with J-Rock and Rob.
Still not an intro.
And host of The Trenches.
Still not an intro.
On Sundays.
And editor of The Great Debate.
All right, so you can begin your round with Dwayne The Rock Johnson and go.
Well, let's get back to some of the things he said about Bruce Willis there. Yeah, you called him the man. You forgot an adjective, the old man who can barely get out of a bathtub anymore. And the other thing that you mentioned about Bruce Willis is you're you hit the nail on the head, and I gotta commend you, sir. He is all over the map, and that's the problem with him. That's what makes him not the greatest action star. He is doing sci-fi, he is doing drama, and the older that he gets, and believe me, it's noticeable that he's a crusty old fiend, the slower down he gets and the less he tries. If you've seen the newest Die Hard film, you'll see that he's just an afterthought on an action film that could have starred anybody. He's absolutely worthless in that film, and the more films he's done since the original Die Hard, the less effective he's been. Now, when it comes to Dwayne The Rock Johnson, not only did he make a name for himself in probably the hardest industry to get a decent reputation, of course, the WWE. This guy is versatile, so not only can he star in a bunch of different action vehicles, but he can bring comedy to it in a way more kind of personable way than Bruce Willis could ever do. Bruce Willis has one catchphrase and one kind of character, whereas The Rock can be across the board in many action films and be the character that the film needs them to be to succeed.
All right, thank you, Rob. And now we bring it back over to Mike the Greek for his counter argument.
Yeah, well, at least Bruce Willis doesn't have to go run back to WWE every time he releases a stinker like G.I. Joe Retaliation or Snitch. I mean, doesn't there seem to be a pattern here? Like, he does a few movies, he loses direction. Oh, I feel like doing children's movies. Oh, that was a great direction to go in. Oh, all of a sudden, my fans are criticizing me for doing too many kids movies. I'm gonna go do Snitch or something like that. Oh, those didn't work out. Well, I'm just gonna become the heavyweight champion again, and that'll at least keep me afloat. At least Bruce Willis can say that he's had a direction throughout his career, and every time he tries to veer from that direction, whether it be 12 Monkeys or whether it be Cop Out, the Kevin Smith film, he still finds his audience, he still finds his target, and that's why he consistently has a great filmography throughout, where I would say The Rock is very diced. He gets attached to really crappy franchises like Journey and the aging Fast and Furious franchise. He just doesn't have any direction. Bruce Willis at least has longevity.
All right, and Rob, final statement.
Bruce Willis, if he finds his audience, it's because he's the same goddamn character in every one. You talk about patterns in filmmaking, Bruce Willis will do a Die Hard film, do two other things that don't work that great. Did you see Surrogates? What a freaking sci-fi flop. 12 Monkeys was okay, but it was no box office crown jewel or anything. And do we have to go into the M. Night stuff that he's done? And then he goes and does another Die Hard because you know what? He can do that seamlessly because he doesn't evolve as a character. Now, you say the Fast and the Furious franchise is aging. I got to tell you, Fast 5 was the biggest one in that series, and it was thanks to The Rock to revitalize that. The Rock is the future. Bruce Willis is the past. He's the old man left in the dust that basically rode, two other people that we're going to talk about, Stallone and Schwarzenegger's coattails, back into it. You get on The Rock for G.I. Joe Retaliation. Well, I got to tell you, Bruce Willis seems to be at the forefront of that film, so you're just kind of knocking your own argument.
All right, gentlemen, good round. Now we move on to round 2. Van Damme versus Statham. Mike the Greek, you have the floor.
Well, Jean-Claude Van Damme really redefined action films in the late 80s and early 90s, really bringing kind of revitalizing that spirit of the 70s where you had true martial arts actors actually playing out these roles. I mean, Statham, he's just a former model pretty boy who essentially plays Bacon from Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels in every single movie. So you're talking about Bruce Willis having a really narrow range. Let's talk about Statham, who is the exact same wise-cracking hustler in every movie. At least Jean-Claude Van Damme, at least we saw some range in Double Impact where he basically played two versions of himself.
Range with him playing the same character twice.
And again, when it comes down to who's actually going to win in a fight,
sorry, go ahead.
You may laugh now, but who's going to win in a fight? The man who has the black belt or Jason Statham? What's he going to do? Take off his Calvin Kleins and whip Van Damme to death or something, whip him into a frenzy? I don't know what's so great about Statham. I really haven't caught that train yet.
All right, Rob, you have the floor.
Well, you must be the last one at the station because everybody else is aboard the Statham Express. Van Damme, I mean, if you want to talk about his range or lack thereof, then go ahead. He's a one-man show. He's been criticized for years of not being able to play well with others. He's got to be at the forefront in some way. That's why after basically Bloodsport, it was all films that drove himself, and then they went from somewhat quality A concepts to B and C flicks. I mean, you talk about Hard Target, Double Impact. I mean, these are shitty movies. The only film that he did worthwhile was maybe Universal Soldier, and him coming back to do the 7th or 8th one in that boring, tired franchise is a pain in the ass. Now, you talk about Statham, you're talking about a versatile actor. Yeah, he does do the wisecracks well, but that's because Van Damme can't even try to speak English half the time, and he relies on his martial arts skills. At least Statham's got charm, personality, and he can bring the fight scenes to the table, let alone do a lot of the driving stunts himself. Statham is the total package, and he can not only play a lead character and be it films like Crank, but he can also be a great sidekick or a guy part of a team like in The Italian Job or as we've seen in The Expendables.
All right, Mike the Greek, counterpoint.
That's weird. When does Statham start speaking English? I mean, I don't know.
Oh, he's British, so I'm pretty sure it's from birth.
Yeah, I guess that's some form of British. I don't know. I mean, you talk about the Statham Express. At which point did the train veer off the tracks and give us a Transporter 3? I don't remember anybody even talking about that movie or caring about that series in general. Crank 2? Didn't he die at the end of the first time? Are we really that desperate where you have to like revitalize like an already shitty like character in Crank that was pretty much should have been a half-hour movie rather than an hour and a half? That's what his films feel like. They feel too long. Okay, it just feels like I get sick of just hearing his wisecracking, limey style after about half an hour, because it's just like a straight line that just keeps going through. No peaks, no valleys, or at least in films like Bloodsport and Universal Soldier, there was a sense of pathos there. Like there's some passion in his delivery, and again, just by the fact that he really knows what he's doing in terms of the martial arts and the action hero stunts, just gives it that much more of a reality to it rather than this kind of fake ass underwater model Jason Statham wannabe boy.
All right, and Rob, final statements for round 2.
Yeah, I guess there just isn't something to be left desired with Statham there. I mean, I guess you just need double Van Damme and double Impact to really feel fulfilled over 90 minutes. I mean, talk about a concept that's just wrong before it begins. Van Damme playing twins of himself, let alone, being basically hunted down in Hard Target. I mean, Van Damme has done nothing since the early 90s, and if it wasn't for guys like Statham and guys like The Rock and Stallone, who we'll get to, he'd still be doing nothing. He's a cokehead who burnt out long ago. At least Statham, he doesn't have to always do the great action films, but he can, and he's capable of anything at any time. Transporter series, you wonder, where the interest is in that. Well, I mean, it was strong enough to not only have a billion different kind of clones come out there after it, but it also spawned a TV series. What's the last thing that Van Damme spawned? JCVD, a documentary on the burnout of, what was supposed to be one of the coolest action stars who just went nowhere fast because of his own selfish needs.
All right, gentlemen, let's bring it to round 3, where we take on the battle of the 80s action star, Schwarzenegger versus Stallone. Mike the Greek, kick it off.
Schwarzenegger is just an icon, a legend. He has redefined cinema through him and James Cameron and certain people that he's worked with. There are so many films that are just landmark films in cinema, in technology. I mean, really look at the massive influence of the Terminator series, Terminator 2 especially, which is arguably one of the greatest action films of all time. You have Predator, which again spawned a huge franchise, a lot of popularity. And then what's great about Schwarzenegger is that he can go above the genre and elevate it to a new status, like a social commentary. I mean, look at films like True Lies. Look at films like The Running Man, which is a big commentary on media culture and all of that kind of stuff. And again, look, Terminator. Terminator 2 is essentially a cautionary film about where we were headed in terms of the military-industrial complex, and a lot of what Arnold represents in that film has actually happened now. And of course, one of the greatest scenes in The Expendables was, of course, when he showed up in the cameo and of course gets a full role in the sequel. He's just iconic. Stallone, he's got Rocky. And I think the fact that people mention Rocky so much is that it's the only good film he's done. Whereas Schwarzenegger fans can turn to Terminator, they can turn to Predator, they can turn to so many different examples of why he's the best.
It's funny that you. Sorry, I'm gonna go ahead, Justin. Is that okay? No demerits.
Yeah. Have at it.
It's funny that you mentioned like 3 films from Schwarzenegger, because that's really all people will ever remember when it comes to Schwarzenegger. Yeah, Terminator, great series, sure. Predator, sure. Running Man, a bit of a B flick. Not a lot of people like it. Sure, it's a soft spot for me. But when you talk about Stallone, you mentioned just Rocky. Come on, Mike. You know that he's also Rambo, probably one of the defining, bloodiest kind of action franchises out there that there is. And you want to talk about social commentary?
Whoever mentions
the merits. You want to talk about social commentary? Look no further than a film like Demolition Man. Sure, really campy on the surface, but it also showcases exactly where we're going. The difference between the two actors is Schwarzenegger burned out really quickly because of his limited range. At least Stallone could keep going, not only through the 80s, but also through the 90s with awesome hits like Daylight. And he also had, Tango and Cash in the 80s that was, critically acclaimed. Plus Cliffhanger. I mean, this guy can launch a franchise on its own. You want to talk about the guy who won't go away? If it wasn't for Stallone, and I'm so glad you brought up the Expendables, Schwarzenegger would still be left trying to find his place in politics or trying to, get his way out of some sort of tabloid scandal. Stallone is the ultimate comeback kid. Not only did he relaunch Rocky, but he relaunched Rambo, and he made action stars cool again with the Expendables. And if it wasn't for him, Schwarzenegger wouldn't have got another look. What's Schwarzenegger done lately? The Last Stand? What a freaking snooze fest that went nowhere. It's a film that starred, his co-star was Johnny Knoxville. Oh yeah, that's a recipe for success. Way to go, Schwarzenegger. You're going nowhere. Well, at least Stallone's going to the top.
All right, Mike the Greek, take it away.
Jesus, I mean, how many comebacks does a guy have to make before we totally write him off? Yeah, that's the thing that's consistent in Stallone's career. Comeback after failure, after Rhinestone, after Daylight. Who the fuck saw that movie? You're talking about Tango and Cash is critically acclaimed. Really? That was the biggest ripoff of Lethal Weapon there is. Nobody cared about that film. Cliffhanger as a franchise? Please don't tell me Rennie Harlan movies are ever going to become a franchise. I thought you went to film school here, Rob. Sylvester Stallone, Rambo. Nobody gives a shit about Rambo. Whenever we
I guess the millions of dollars don't mean anything. Mr. Box Office IMDb page.
Like Rambo is basically a B movie franchise that just happens to have a lot of fans. It's just like a Chuck Norris film. It'll never really be taken seriously, but it's always going to have its cult status. And I mean, you're talking about Last Stand. What the hell was Bullet to the Head?
It was a Walter Hill script.
The Expendables, and you're talking about Bruce Willis going along for Stallone's ride. I think it's really Stallone who needs to pull out actual relevant stars like Jet Li and other better action stars to actually make the Expendables work, because if it was just Stallone and a whole bunch of grunts, that thing would have tanked right away.
So I love how you say that it tanked right away, but you also want to point to the big, minute-long cameo that Schwarzenegger had that apparently saved the film. Here's what it comes down to. Schwarzenegger's nothing but a body who can speak broken English and try to pull off some jokes. I mean, we all love Kindergarten Cop. That's what we want to see the Terminator do. We also want to see Jingle All the Way. And what about Last Action Hero if you want to stick to action films? Do you want to talk about films that nobody saw or want to forget? Last Action Hero? My God, what a piece of fucking shit. And that's why he went away altogether. Now, see, the difference between the two is what you're ignoring is that Stallone at least has the ability to write and direct the films. That's what makes him a better action star, because he can understand it from all levels, where Schwarzenegger just has to be pointed in different directions and thrown out there. It's funny that you're such a Schwarzenegger fan, but not once did he even try to bring up Conan, a film where he basically had no dialogue. You want to talk about stuff that's offensive to people? Maybe we should revisit Junior and, ask what all the feminists think about that film. Or The Brutal Twins. Sure, it's a movie that people will have good memories of, but wait till Triplets comes out with Eddie Murphy, because of course if it's live action with Eddie Murphy nowadays, it's going to be shit. So wait for that blockbuster stinker to come your way. At least Stallone's got potential out there and Schwarzenegger has none. He's going to try to revitalize his career. You can accuse Stallone of comeback after comeback, but the point is, whether it's a comeback or not, he keeps coming back on top because he's a popular guy who knows what the hell he's doing, where Schwarzenegger is more of a glitch, a campy kind of fad. It's like, oh yeah, it's kind of cool to see the Terminator do this, but at the end of the day, it's just not enough to make the box office what it needs to be, and the fans are getting tired of it.
All right, gentlemen, you have put your arguments forth.
That's all I got to say. Over the top.
Yeah, you have all put valid arguments in front of me. Now I must look at all the evidence and make my ruling. So let's knock these out one at a time, shall we? Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Well, The Rock is probably one of the top action stars today. That doesn't mean he is the best action star of them all. He is rising, but he has a long way to go before he can take the title of greatest action star. So, Rocky, we love you, but you're out of this one. Next.
Whoa. So does that mean you're favoring Willis in round one, or are you just eliminating as you go?
Oh, I'm just eliminating as I go.
Okay.
All right, next up, Van Damme. All right, Van Damme, back in his heyday, some cool moves. But really, Van Damme anymore? No, I'm sorry. He cannot make the list for greatest action star. It just doesn't work that way. The guy is almost a memory, except for his bad guy appearance in the most recent Expendables. So, Van Damme, you're out of here, buddy. Now, let's take a look at Jason Statham. Statham, good movies, Transporter wasn't bad, some other good action movies. He's a hit among the ladies. Let's not rule that out. I think they all get weak in the knees and starry-eyed when they see him, but at the end of the day, is he the greatest action star of all time? Probably not. No, he's not straight up action. He's got a lot of other things going for him. So Statham, out of here. All right. That leaves us with Willis, Schwarzenegger, and Stallone. So, Willis. Well, what can I say about this guy? Yeah, he was a good action star back in the day.
In his one action film.
In his past, I mean, he's had some decent movies, but anything as of recent, I just cannot be sold on Willis being the greatest action star of all time. It's too much of, oh, I'm old, I can't do this anymore, I can't do that anymore. His performance in Looper, less than amazing. So I can't really sign off on him being the greatest action star of all time. So Bruce Willis, he's hitting the sticks and going to play some more in his band. So that leaves us with Schwarzenegger and Stallone. Round 3 is really where it's at. This determines which one of these two characters is the greatest action star of all time. Schwarzenegger, obviously, string of hits left and right. Back in the day, he was one of the top action stars. It's funny, not too long ago, he actually passed the torch to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in a little movie called The Rundown, right at the beginning of the movie. Well, he left, did his politics thing, then came back, and he's still trying to find his way back. Now we take a look at Stallone. Well, Stallone, yeah, he disappeared for a little while, on and off, but he has remained in movies over the past few decades. Not all of them were great. I mean, there's Get Carter, which isn't horrible, but he put on some pounds for that movie.
You're thinking Copland. He put on pounds for Copland.
Well, no, I was actually thinking Get Carter.
Both, actually.
Both, yeah. Get Carter. He was he was a little weighty in that movie. So, but yeah, Copland as well put on some weight. But where he really comes out, and Rob touched on this, was his ability to write and direct his own material. Now, this is something that Schwarzenegger has not done. The only thing Schwarzenegger has done recently was, knock up his maid and, I don't know if he actually got divorced, but at least was about to lose everything. And, it actually took Stallone to bring Schwarzenegger back into the game. And even though these guys are supposedly good friends, if one of them's bringing the other one back into the game, that means he must be sitting up high on the mountain. So, Mike the Greek, I'm sorry to say, but you have lost this round, and Stallone will be named Best Action Star of all. Gentlemen, feel free to talk amongst yourselves.
Okay, so now that the gloves are off, let's, like as always, these are just arbitrarily, Mike and I picking one side and doing our best to argue and hiding the downfalls of the sides that we're picking. And let's just have like a kind of basic roundtable discussion of, action stars, the whole idea of the action movie, where it's going, and where some of these guys are now. I think the big three are obviously Bruce Willis, Schwarzenegger, and Stallone. And besides the Expendables, which is kind of more of a, it's a campy kind of, fatty kind of thing. I don't think the action film has found its footing in the 21st century yet. The closest that we'll get is more like heist films or car chases. I mean, what do you guys think?
What about Chuck Norris? We forgot to add Chuck Norris to this list.
I mean, you want to criticize some of Stallone's films as being B movies or Van Damme. I think you got to put like Chuck Norris in probably Van Damme territory or worse. I mean, what do you think, Mike?
It's pretty much all there. I think that's what the Expendables really was. It really just was a great roundup of B-movie actors we just love to see. But again, it doesn't.
It's like a greatest hits, right? It's like a greatest
really
hits of action stars.
But I think that's what really makes the action heroes, just that over-the-top kind of persona that couldn't really carry water in something a bit more serious. I think it has to be more B-movie-ish, which essentially does become an A film in terms of cult status. So it's really hard to put down a Chuck Norris film. I mean, it's easy to say it's like, oh, it's a B-movie, it's schlock, but there's something especially significant about those films that could never be done without Chuck Norris in them. It's just that his personal stamp on it.
But like going forward, I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, The Last Stand bombed at the box office. Bullet in the Head did less than stellar business. And I think there was another action film that came out recently, but it didn't do well. Like, if it's not The Expendables, does it even matter if there's an action film?
It comes down to time. I mean, again, you have to look at time and space and cycles. I mean, Schwarzenegger and Stallone both took probably a good decade at least to get to where they needed to be in terms of just, becoming Rambo or becoming the Terminator. I mean, they were in the film industry for a long time. Like you were saying before, J-Rock, Dwayne Johnson is still an up-and-comer. I mean, he has that possibility. He's big. He's burly, he's good looking, he's got that kind of 80s, hyper masculine persona. You give him some time to really kind of get his acting boots off and kind of put wrestling behind him, and I think you'll see probably in the next 5-10 years that he'll become the next Schwarzenegger. I mean, he's already signing on for another Journey to the Center of the Earth film, and he's doing just a lot of great projects. So I think give him some time and you will see like the elevation of the new action hero, because I think it's going to hit a wall. I mean, I don't like the idea that Colin Farrell is the new archetype. It's like Colin Farrell is all of a sudden this new action hero. He doesn't feel like an action hero to me. I miss the days of Schwarzenegger and Stallone.
Yeah. Well, you know what about let me ask you guys this. You ever heard of a little movie that came out of Indonesia called The Raid?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like this
and it was released in North America as The Raid Redemption.
It was. And, this is one of those movies where it was highly touted as being one of the best action movies to have come out in a very long time. But unfortunately, since it was language-wise was Indonesian, it was only subtitled here in the States, most people have not seen it. I think they're actually in the process of shooting the sequel in Indonesia now. But from what I've heard, it is some of the best action sequences to have hit the silver screen in decades.
Yeah, it's basically kind of like your video game level ladder, where I believe the story synopsis is cops basically center on this one building and they raid it to stop like the crime syndicate from going on, and it's basically our main character going from floor 1 to floor 2, like all the way to the top, and it's like different kind of challenges along the way, very much you'd see like in video games.
Absolutely. And the thing, too, with action films, kind of going back to a point I touched on earlier about Schwarzenegger's, films being very topical, very in line with a lot of fears about the future and technology. You got to think, too, like when you go back to these classics, like the first Die Hard, what made that film great? It was one building. It was touching on terrorist issues, and it also allowed character to come out, because you're not relying on multiple locations, CG, and all this kind of stuff. One building, a bunch of characters stuck in it. Why was Terminator great? Again, touching on fears of the future and technology. Why was Rambo great? Has to do with foreign policy. I think if we stop dumbing down all these big action movies and start examining issues within them, at least subliminally, people aren't stupid. At the end of the day, they want to see explosions, they want to see effects, but they also want to feel like they've learned something.
Yeah, I think audiences got to get behind a character who believes in something that, the universal public believes in. And that's not to say we need, John McClane fighting a bunch of terrorists in another country. We need something that hits home and, generally has a provoking fear that we can get on board with. As far as The Rock, possibly being the next superstar, it's going to take more than signing on to Journey 3 or like Fast and the Furious. They really need to launch a character behind him and have his own franchise. I mean, they haven't done that really. I mean, they tried it a little bit with Walking Tall, and that's a really good film. It didn't do, great numbers at the box office, but it was a good film. And they really need to get a character behind him, whether it's a war vet or something like that. But until they can get behind somebody with human interest and stuff that they can relate to, then I don't think he can be that next action star. He's just going to be like a sideshow.
Yeah, I think they tried to do that with the Scorpion King.
Yeah.
And it once again, it just didn't go anywhere.
Well, I mean, you're talking about a period fantasy piece with the Scorpion King. I mean, there's two things against it right there. If you don't like fantasy and you don't like that period, then you're not going to get on board with it. Not to mention the Scorpion King is kind of like an antagonist when we first meet him, and then they go back to the prequel, which is, going back before, and you already know what's going to happen. Like, you need to launch something new. Like, if you're a writer, you got to think of something that this guy has been through. I mean, honestly, you got to put him in Danny Trejo's shoes, but give The Rock the kind of roles in situations that he gets in, like in Machete, or in can you imagine The Rock in a film like Machete? Just
in
like
a grindhouse film?
Yeah, just like a straight up like kind of revenge flick with The Rock on a fucking mission. He comes where he's got to come from, and he does what he's got to do to save the day for the people around him. I mean,
well, that's kind of what I liked about The Rundown. I thought The Rundown is easily one of his best movies to date, even though it was, I think, his second movie after Scorpion King.
I haven't seen it, so I can't comment.
I
just
highly recommend that one. It's with Christopher Walken, Sean William Scott. It had action. It had a little bit of mystery to it. It had some comedy in there. Overall, I thought that was a really good movie, and it was a franchisable character, but it never went anywhere.
And I think it's about giving The Rock some credit for his talents. I mean, the guy has a lot of potential that people are wasting. You just have to study his monologues from the WWE. I mean, the guy is just brimming with improvisational talent and character and range. I mean, even though I wasn't really crazy about Be Cool, I thought it was kind of a shitty movie, but I really liked his role in that, being the gay bodyguard, I think it was.
Yeah.
Just his ability to snap from tough guy to all of a sudden, this kind of goofy homosexual character. And I love that. I thought that was great. His ability to just switch roles. And you could always see that in his monologues of The Rock, that he could just play those different voices. And I think that in movies like Fast 5 and G.I. Joe, we're just getting kind of that static, hyper-masculine typecast. Exactly. We're not getting those chances for his character, his personality to really shine through.
See, I think the only chance he's got right now, looking at his upcoming slate, would be something like Hercules, but I think Brett Ratner is attached to direct that, and we all know that's going to be a piece of shit.
Oh, yeah.
But at least there's like a franchise kind of like Conan the Barbarian, where, if you can buy into the fantasy stuff and the period stuff, the heightened supernaturalism, then, he seems to be like the perfect fit for something like that. Why he wasn't cast as like maybe the new Conan, nothing against Jason Momoa, but, that's exactly what it needs. I mean, how come he's not being talked about for the new Terminator film or other things like this, just make him the unstoppable force, whether he's on the side of good or bad, and then you've got something worthwhile there.
Well, I would love to see him in Terminator. Tell me that wouldn't be bad. I mean, because isn't
even
Justin
if he was
Lin still attached to direct that?
Yeah, even if he was like on the good guy's side, like he was stopping like a future John Connor, or he was like trying to help him, or something like that. I think that would be interesting. Then you got like The Rock versus Schwarzenegger there, if Schwarzenegger's still supposed to be a part of it. I mean, I think that would be interesting.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and I mean, it'll be interesting to see what he does with lore. There's this new film coming out for Barry Sonnenfeld. They say that it's about a young man defending the world from legendary beasts from folklore. So again, what you're talking about, Rob, maybe a franchisable character might be in the works there. I mean, Barry Sonnenfeld's had a string of hits with Men in Black and other films, so maybe something good there. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think we can all agree the action genre isn't quite what we remember it, and it's certainly not doing great numbers at the box office. So
Yeah.
it's either got to be a film that's about something with a character that we care about, or it's just got to do its course and come back almost the way that horror films from the late 80s went quietly away for a good 6 or 7 years until Scream came out and kind of revitalized that and got the jump wagon on there.
Honestly, I think that's about going low 5. I think maybe you got to trim down your budget and really just try to be more experimental. I mean, really think about some of these classics. I mean, again, look at the first Die Hard compared to the rest. Very simple in comparison. Again, one building, very few characters, a lot lower budget than the other films. But again, as we know from many, many examples, sometimes when you have a lower budget, that forces more creativity out, and I think that's what we need. I think with the modern action movies, they're borrowing too heavily from 80s and 90s archetypes, where we really have to define what this new generation's about.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining us for this episode of The Great Debate. Sylvester Stallone takes the title for greatest action star to date, beating out The Rock and a lot of other guys.
A lot of other important guys.
We've been talking about The Rock nonstop for the past 10 minutes. But great, very good spirited debate. Everybody had very good points, but in the end, it is Stallone. So, Rob, we thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Mike the Greek, as
4-0.
always, pleasure having you.
4-0.
Always a pleasure.
Until next week, this has been The Great Debate.